A peaceful lake house stood alone, abandoned for years until Matthew Cooper purchased it as his dream home. Little did he know, a power-hungry HOA president had other plans for his property. "You'll join our association or face the consequences," she warned with a plastic smile. But Matt had one advantage she didn't expect. This property was never legally part of their HOA. What happened next shocked an entire community. If you've ever dealt with an overbearing HOA or watched helplessly as someone abused their tiny bit of power, hit subscribe. This story of revenge against corruption is exactly what you need to hear. Matt Cooper had spent years saving for his dream, a lakeside property where he could escape the chaos of city life. When he finally found it, the house was perfect. Slightly worn from years of neglect, but sitting on a gorgeous waterfront lot with unlimited potential. The previous owner had abandoned it years ago, and despite needing significant repairs, Matt saw only opportunity. He was ready to invest sweat equity to transform this forgotten house into his sanctuary. Just 3 days after closing the deal, a gleaming white Lexus pulled into his gravel driveway. Matt was unloading lumber from his truck when he spotted a well-dressed woman, approaching with the confidence of someone who expected the world to bend to her will. Two associates followed behind her, one clutching a clipboard like it contained state secrets. "Mr. Cooper, I presume?" The woman extended a manicured hand. "Karen Waters, president of the Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association." Matt wiped sawdust from his palm before reluctantly shaking her hand. "I don't recall signing up for an HOA." Karen's smile never faltered, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Well, that's the thing. This house has been abandoned for quite some time, and our association has been maintaining neighborhood standards. We assumed the property would remain under our oversight." She gestured vaguely toward the lake. "It's important that all properties in our community meet certain standards." Matt crossed his arms. "This house isn't part of your HOA. It was never under your authority. I did my research before buying." Karen let out a dramatic sigh as if dealing with a particularly stubborn child. "You see, Mr. Cooper, when a property is left vacant for too long, it risks becoming an eyesore. That's why we have rules in place to ensure everything stays up to code." "And what does that have to do with me?" Matt's voice remained steady. Karen tilted her head, clearly not accustomed to resistance. "For starters, we'd like to discuss how to integrate you into our community. That means adhering to our guidelines, paying the necessary fees, and ensuring the home maintains our standards." Matt chuckled, shaking his head. "Let me stop you right there. I bought this house outright. It's private property. I'm not interested in joining your HOA, and I don't owe you anything." For a brief moment, Karen's perfectly composed expression cracked. Her smile tightened into something artificial and strained. "I understand you're new here, Mr. Cooper, but we're not asking. These are the rules we have the authority to enforce." Matt stepped forward, his voice remaining calm but firm. "No, you don't. I did my research before buying this place. My property isn't under HOA jurisdiction. If the previous owner abandoned it, that's not my problem. You have zero legal right to demand anything from me." The two associates behind Karen exchanged nervous glances. Clearly, they weren't accustomed to anyone challenging their authority. Karen's fingers tightened slightly around her designer purse. "I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings." "Then we understand each other perfectly," Matt replied evenly. Karen studied him for a long moment before forcing a laugh. "Well, I suppose we'll see how things go. Have a lovely day, Mr. Cooper." With that, she turned sharply on her heels and marched back to her Lexus, her two lackeys trailing behind. Matt watched them drive away, a nagging feeling settling in his gut. He recognized the type. People who thrived on control and couldn't stand being told no. This wouldn't be the last he'd see of Karen Waters. Shrugging off the encounter, he returned to unloading supplies, determined not to let some self-important HOA president ruin his excitement for his new home. Little did he know, Karen had already decided that Matt Cooper would be her next problem to solve, one way or another. Matt's first encounter with Karen had left him uneasy, but he was determined not to let some overreaching HOA dictate what he could do with his own property. He threw himself into renovations, spending long hours clearing debris, replacing rotted wood, and reinforcing the foundation of the old pier that extended into the lake. Within days, though, it became clear that the HOA wasn't taking his rejection lightly. It started with official-looking letters in his mailbox, each bearing the HOA's logo and listing supposed violations. The first accused him of having an unkempt lawn, despite the fact that most of his yard was still a functional construction site. The second claimed his unapproved construction required prior authorization from the association's architectural committee. Matt tossed them into the trash without a second thought. But then things escalated. One afternoon, returning from a supply run to the hardware store, he found a group of workers dismantling his wooden pier. Pieces of lumber floated aimlessly on the lake's surface while two men in orange vests loaded debris into a truck. Matt slammed his truck door and stormed toward them. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" One of the workers, a scrawny guy clutching a clipboard, barely looked up. HOA ordered this pier removed, said it was a hazard. Matt clenched his fists, trying to keep his temper in check. "This pier is on my property. Who gave you permission?" The worker shrugged indifferently. "Talk to the HOA." Matt took a deep breath and then did something that caught everyone off guard. He grabbed a crowbar from his toolbox, walked to the remaining wooden supports, and began violently ripping them out himself. Splinters flew as he hacked away, making sure every remaining piece was either broken or floating in the water. The workers stood frozen, staring at him in disbelief. "What are you doing?" one finally asked. Matt wiped sweat from his forehead and smirked. "Making sure it's really unsafe now. Get the hell off my property." The workers didn't argue. Within minutes, they packed up and left. That night, Matt installed motion-activated cameras around his property, placing them strategically near the driveway, at the back entrance, and overlooking what remained of his pier. He even put up fake security signs reading, "24/7 surveillance, trespassers will be prosecuted." If the HOA thought they could intimidate him, they were in for a surprise. The next morning, Matt woke to an even bigger mess. Someone had dumped a pile of trash in his front yard: old tires, broken furniture, and several bags of construction debris. At first, he thought it might be careless passers-by, but then he noticed a printed note stuck to one of the tires. "Maybe if your property looked less like a dump, it wouldn't attract garbage." HOA. Matt's jaw tightened. These people were really trying to push him, but instead of getting mad, he got even. He loaded all the trash onto his truck and drove straight to the HOA office, a sleek modern building near the entrance to the community. Without hesitation, he dumped the entire load right in front of their doors, making sure to scatter it for full effect. As he climbed back into his truck, the receptionist ran outside, mouth agape. "Sir, what are you doing?" Matt leaned out of his window. "Returning your community contribution. Tell Karen she forgot to pick up her mess." With that, he drove off. That night, his security cameras caught two shadowy figures sneaking around his house. One used a flashlight to scan the windows while the other tried the back door handle. Before they could go any further, a loud, booming voice came from Matt's newly installed speaker system. "Hey, jackasses! Smile for the camera!" Both figures bolted. One tripped over a bucket, landing face first in the dirt. Matt grinned as he watched the footage from his phone. This war was just getting started. Matt knew the HOA wouldn't back down easily, but he hadn't expected them to escalate so quickly. The confrontation with the workers at the pier, the retaliatory trash dump, and his late-night security camera scare had all confirmed one thing. Karen wasn't just playing power games. She was making this personal. The next morning, he woke to find a bright red violation notice zip-tied to his mailbox. It was thicker than before. Pages of documents stapled together with official-looking stamps. The first page boldly declared, "Final notice, multiple violations. Failure to comply will result in legal action." Matt tore through the document. The list of supposed violations had grown absurd. Unauthorized fencing modifications. He didn't have a fence. Unapproved landscaping choices. His yard was still under construction. Noise disturbances due to improper renovation schedules. He worked during normal daylight hours. There was also a demand to pay $2,500 in HOA back fees, a blatant attempt to intimidate him into submission. Matt scoffed. He'd expected nonsense, but this was on another level. Not long after, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated before answering. Mr. Cooper. Karen's voice was as smooth as ever, but this time there was an unmistakable edge beneath her usual condescending tone. I see you received our notice. Oh, you mean the stack of toilet paper someone zip-tied to my mailbox? Matt said dryly. Karen let out a small laugh, completely unfazed. I admire your stubbornness, but you're making this much harder on yourself than it needs to be. Karen, let me make this simple for you, he interrupted. You have zero authority over my house. You can send all the fake fines you want, but I'm not paying a damn cent. There was a pause, and then Karen sighed theatrically. You should really reconsider, Matt. After all, it would be such a shame if something happened to your property. Matt's grip on the phone tightened. It was subtle, but she had just threatened him. Instead of reacting, he grinned. That almost sounded like a threat, Karen. Oh no, she purred. Just friendly advice. Have a wonderful day, Mr. Cooper. The call ended. Matt exhaled slowly. If she wanted to play dirty, so could he. That afternoon, he took his security system a step further. More cameras, more motion sensors, and a direct alert system to his phone. He even added a few fake cameras prominently displayed to make it seem like he had surveillance in every corner. Then he went one step further, installing hidden wildlife cameras deep in the trees surrounding his property. If anyone tried sneaking around again, they'd never even see what caught them. Sure enough, the next night his security alerts lit up his phone. Two figures were creeping along the side of his house, dressed in dark clothes. Matt, watching the feed, recognized one of them from the trash incident. The other was bulkier, moving cautiously, scanning the area. They were planting something. Matt didn't wait. He grabbed a high-powered flashlight and stepped out onto his porch. Before they could react, he blinded them with the beam and yelled, "Hey!" Nice night for trespassing, huh? The two men panicked. One tripped over a garden hose and face-planted into a pile of dirt, scrambling like a wounded animal. The bigger one dropped a can of spray paint. It clattered loudly on the wooden deck before he took off running. Matt walked over and picked up the can, red spray paint. They had been about to vandalize his house. He chuckled to himself and waved at the security camera. Hope Karen enjoys the footage. The next morning, Matt wasn't surprised to find Karen's Lexus parked at the edge of his driveway. Unlike before, she wasn't flanked by her usual lackeys. This time she stood alone, arms crossed, expression unreadable. It was a rare sight, Karen without an entourage. That could only mean one thing. She wanted to make a deal. Matt took his time approaching, deliberately wiping his hands on a rag as he walked over. Back again so soon? He said, leaning against his truck. Karen gave him a measured smile. Matt, I think we got off on the wrong foot. He chuckled. Pretty sure you put both feet in my business first. She ignored the jab, sighing dramatically. Look, I'll be honest with you. The HOA and I, we don't like conflict. We're all about keeping the community harmonious. So I thought, why fight when we can work together? Matt arched an eyebrow. Oh yeah? And what working together are you thinking of? Karen reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a folder. A membership package, she said sweetly. Special offer. If you join the HOA now, we'll waive all the fines, and in return, we'll help ensure your renovations meet community standards. Matt slowly took the folder, flipping through the pages. The contract was ridiculous. It demanded monthly fees, required all renovations to be pre-approved, and even dictated what color his house could be painted. Wow, he muttered. This almost looks like blackmail. Oh, wait, it is. Karen's smile twitched, but she kept her voice even. Think of it as an opportunity, Matt. Join us, and all this trouble disappears. Matt closed the folder and nodded. You know what? This is a big decision. How about you come inside so we can talk more? Karen's eyes gleamed with victory. I thought you'd see reason. She followed him onto the porch, stepping inside his living room. The moment she did, Matt casually pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. A clear recording of their conversation played back. The part where she admitted that if he joined, his fines would disappear. The implied threat. The blatant extortion. Karen froze. "You recorded me," she hissed. "Sure did," Matt said, grinning. "And I bet the local news would love to hear how the HOA president runs her little scam." Karen's face went pale, then red. She snatched her folder back and stormed toward the door. "You'll regret this, Matt." He leaned against the doorframe as she stomped back to her car. "I think you're the one who's regretting it already." As Karen's car screeched away, Matt turned back to his phone. That recording was going to be useful. If you've ever wanted to get back at someone who abused their power, hit like and subscribe now. Because what happens next is the ultimate payback. Matt had expected retaliation from Karen after their last encounter, but even he was surprised by how quickly she escalated things. The very next night, his cameras picked up suspicious activity around his property. 3 figures, Karen and 2 large men dressed in dark clothing, were creeping toward his back door. The same 2 thugs who had tried to vandalize his house earlier. Matt, watching the live feed from his phone, exhaled sharply. So this was how far she was willing to go. She had already lost the legal battle, and now she was resorting to breaking and entering. He put down his coffee and grabbed a baseball bat. The men picked the lock on the back door, stepping inside carefully while Karen waited outside, looking around nervously. They clearly thought they were being stealthy, but they had no idea what Matt had prepared. As soon as they entered, a loud alarm blared through the house, followed by Matt's own pre-recorded voice booming from the speakers. "Congratulations, you've just broken into private property? Stay where you are, the police have been called." The 2 men panicked, spinning around, unsure of whether to run or hide. Before they could decide, the house went pitch black. Matt had cut the power manually from his control panel, plunging them into total darkness. One of the thugs stumbled backward, knocking over a shelf full of paint cans. A thick bucket of white primer splashed all over him, covering his face and suit like something out of a cartoon. The second guy flailed in the dark, trying to regain balance, only to step right into a shallow bucket of varnish Matt had deliberately left on the floor. His foot stuck, and as he tried to yank it out, he lost balance and crashed into the kitchen table, sending tools and wood planks flying. Meanwhile, Karen was still outside, oblivious to the chaos happening inside. Matt waited in the shadows near the hallway, baseball bat resting on his shoulder. "You boys having fun in there?" he called out, his voice dripping with amusement. One of the men turned toward the sound of his voice, only to take a direct punch to the gut. He collapsed onto his knees, coughing. The second one finally freed himself from the varnish bucket, just in time for Matt to grab him by the back of his collar and shove him face first into a stack of insulation foam. The thick, sticky material clung to his hair and clothes, making him look like a rejected snowman. Karen, finally realizing something was wrong, cautiously stepped toward the house. "What's taking so long?" she hissed. At that moment, the front door flew open, and one of her men, completely drenched in paint, stumbled out, slipping on the porch steps and landing flat on his back. Karen stared in horror. "What the hell happened to you?" Before she could react, Matt stepped out behind them, flipping the power back on with a remote switch. The porch lights flooded the area, illuminating the disastrous state of her 2 hired goons, one covered in paint, the other in insulation foam. "Nice try, Karen," Matt said, tossing a set of zip ties toward the dazed men on the ground. "But you forgot one thing. I'm always one step ahead." Karen's face twisted in fury. "You think this is over?" she shrieked. Matt pointed toward one of his security cameras, blinking ominously in the corner. "Oh, it's over," he said with a smirk. "And the best part? I got it all on video." Just then, sirens wailed in the distance. Karen's face lost all color. The flashing red and blue lights cut through the night as 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop in Matt's driveway. Officers piled out, hands on their holsters, ready for anything. But what they saw left them momentarily stunned. 2 thugs completely covered in paint and insulation foam, lying on the porch like a pair of failed burglars from a bad comedy, and Karen standing frozen near her car. "Officers, this is all a misunderstanding," she blurted out, her voice an octave higher than usual. Matt, arms crossed, gestured toward his security cameras. No misunderstanding here, officers. These three broke into my house. It's all recorded. Breaking and entering, vandalism, attempted assault, you name it. The lead officer, a burly man with a tired expression, turned to the two men on the ground. Is that true? The paint-covered thug groaned. I want my lawyer. Yeah, you're going to need one, the officer muttered, snapping a pair of handcuffs onto his wrists. His partner did the same with the other man, who was still peeling insulation foam off his face. Then the officer turned to Karen. And you? Karen straightened up, trying to regain her composure. I had nothing to do with this. These men must have acted on their own. Matt let out a laugh. Oh, yeah? Because I have a recording of you orchestrating this whole thing. You threatened me, and now you're caught red-handed. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She was trapped, and she knew it. The officer sighed. Karen Waters, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit burglary and harassment. You have the right to remain silent. This isn't fair, Karen screeched as they pulled her hands behind her back. I was just trying to protect the community. Matt grinned as they shoved her into the back of the patrol car. Guess the community is going to have to manage without you. Here's something most people don't know. In many states, HOAs that attempt to enforce rules on properties not legally within their jurisdiction can be sued for harassment and fraudulent misrepresentation. What Karen did crossed from merely unethical into criminal territory. Karen's arrest sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. News of her crimes spread like wildfire, and within days, the HOA was under intense legal scrutiny. At a local hearing, it was ruled that the association had engaged in harassment, extortion, and fraudulent fines. The verdict: a $200,000 fine against the HOA for illegal practices. Karen was permanently removed from her position as HOA president, and several board members resigned in disgrace. Many homeowners, realizing they had been bullied and manipulated for years, pushed for the HOA to be dissolved entirely. Behind closed doors, other residents came forward with their own stories. Tales of selective enforcement, personal vendettas, and intimidation tactics. Some had been fined for infractions as minor as having flowers that weren't on the approved plants list. Others had been threatened with legal action for questioning fee increases. One elderly couple had nearly lost their home when the HOA placed a lien against their property over a disputed $500 landscaping fee. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered that Karen had been running the HOA like her personal fiefdom for nearly a decade. Financial records showed suspicious payments to companies owned by her family members for community maintenance. The architectural committee responsible for approving all exterior changes consisted entirely of her close friends. The community that Karen had claimed to protect was now calling for accountability. A town hall meeting was held where residents voted overwhelmingly to restructure the HOA with strict limitations on its power and complete financial transparency. The old guard was swept away, replaced by neighbors who promised to serve rather than rule. As for Matt, he finally finished renovating his lake house without anyone interfering. His new pier stood tall, his property was secure, and best of all, there was no more HOA breathing down his neck. One afternoon, as he relaxed on his porch with a cold beer, a few neighbors stopped by, this time not to harass him, but to thank him. You really took them down, one man chuckled. Guess we all owe you for standing up to them. Matt raised his beer in a mock toast. Anytime. Just don't ask me to join a neighborhood committee. They laughed, and for the first time since moving in, Matt truly felt at home. The HOA was gone, the lake house was his, and peace had finally returned to the shore. Sometimes it takes just one person willing to stand their ground to expose corruption that everyone else had simply learned to live with. Matt hadn't just won his freedom from a rogue HOA. He had liberated an entire community that had forgotten they had rights worth fighting for. As the sun set over the lake, casting golden reflections across the water, Matt took a long drink of his beer and smiled. The house that was supposed to be his nightmare had become exactly what he'd always dreamed of, A sanctuary where the only rules were the ones he chose to live by.